Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to look at Acts chapter 25, verse 13, through Acts 26, verse 32. So we've got a good long section of text here. So what's going on in this section? In this section of text, we hear that Paul has appealed his case to the emperor. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about how others in authority have basically been doing Paul's trial and have been trying to see what they can do with him. The thing that Paul has pleaded guilty to is proclaiming Jesus and him crucified. All of these other charges that have been brought up against him are false. And it's kind of like, I don't care what everybody else says about that. I will admit that I've been talking about Jesus. Fine. But still, the powers that be have to know what to do with Paul because he's kind of there in their midst and he's making some people mad with all this Jesus talk. So Paul appeals his case to the emperor. It's kind of like in our country, if you've got some trial that you're at and you appeal your case to the Supreme Court. It's like you're going as high as you can go. Let this top authority hear my story and let them decide. So this is what Paul has requested. However, he makes this request and he tells Festus about it. Well, then Festus asks King Agrippa what to do. Because Festus is now facing this problem. He has to send Paul to the emperor, but he has to explain why he's sending him. Again, Paul hasn't committed any crime. So why should someone who's not a criminal be sent to the emperor? It doesn't make sense. But Festus knows he's got to do something with Paul. So he asks the king. It's like, okay, King Agrippa, help me out with this. In the letter I send to the emperor, when I send Paul, I'm going to send this letter explaining why Paul is before you. What should I say? So the king has to examine Paul now. And Paul tells King Agrippa his life story. He tells about his conversion. He talks about his preaching. He tells his story. And when he tells his story, you see that these charges that people have brought against him are false. Paul basically explains, right, I haven't committed any crime. When you think about it, Paul's pleading to the emperor and hoping that the emperor is going to side with him by seeing that he hasn't committed any crime, thereby getting people like the king and Festus in trouble, right? Paul's not in trouble. He's not the one who's done something wrong. Paul's, in a way, trying to turn the tables on them, but he's using their own system to do it. So he's telling the king his life story, and when he gets to the end, he's trying to convert the king. He's trying to get the king to believe in Jesus too. And the king sees this. The king's like, what? You want me to be a Christian now too? And then Paul takes this moment and basically says, yes, I want you, king, and everyone else who's hearing me plead my case, I would like for all of you to be just as I am, except for these chains that I have, right? He wants all of them to be as passionate about Jesus as he is, but he doesn't want them to face these kind of trials and chains and stuff that he has to deal with. So we see Paul in the midst of this very difficult trial, using this moment as a teachable moment. He's taking the opportunity here in the midst of his own trial to tell people about Jesus. Paul will not shut up about Jesus. He admits that. He says, I am guilty of telling people about Jesus. I will not stop. Paul has come a long way since his days of being Saul, when he tried to arrest people who were talking about Jesus. Now he's become one of their main spokespeople. And here, he takes this moment during his trial to tell people about Jesus. He turns this into a teachable moment. Now, for us. Think about times in your life that have been teachable moments for you when you can tell someone about Jesus. Maybe you see that someone just needs your help. Or maybe you're trying to help your child learn a lesson about something, whatever the case may be. But in that moment, you take that situation and you use it, you talk about it, and you help them learn about Jesus. In a way, this is what Paul is doing. He's taking this moment during his trial to tell people about Jesus. So there are all sorts of ways and times that we can tell people about Jesus. And Paul is showing us here that even in difficult moments, you can still tell people about Jesus. There's your 5-minute Bible study. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.